Mosaic. Hope you had a great Christmas. Thanks for joining us here this morning. We have a message being brought by our beloved young intern, Loghan Dawson. We've loved watching him grow and learn and develop in ministry and as a man. I'm excited to hear what he has from God this morning. Also, next week, looking forward to seeing you back in person, starting off the year, starting a new series called Built Different. Can't wait to see you then.
Good morning, Mosaic. I'm so excited to be here today with you guys. This is the first week coming out of a series that Adam called Comfort and Joy, where he was talking about the difference between the two. And today, I think it's just fitting to talk about a guy in the Bible who lived this out. I mean, he pretty much had the life. It was one of the most uncomfortable situations a person can go through. And even then, this man still kept his faith anchored in God, which I think is so interesting. This guy named Job, he lost it all. He lost his money, he lost his farm, he lost his livelihood. More importantly than any of that though, Job lost his family. Even through that, he remained faithful in everything that he did. But eventually, as his life kept going, the weight of all of this loss became too much for him to handle on his own. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about something that I'm going to call the domino effect. So what the domino effect is imagine, I'm sure you've played with them before, there's these little ceramic rectangles called dominoes, of course, and the aim of the game is pretty simple. You line up as many of these as you can in a row, and you try to knock one down and have it knock the whole line down. So some people take this to the extreme and they fill like entire garages or barns or basketball courts with dominoes. I urge you to watch a video of it because it's so cool. It's like the most satisfying thing in the world. But today Job, he was playing with dominoes that were a little bigger than normal. They were closer to like the rocks you see at Stonehenge. That's what he was playing with. I don't know about you, but for me in my life, I feel that after about like the second or third bad thing that happens in a row. For example, for me, I had some car troubles and then I had some class that I had to do and I was late to a couple classes. I had to rush to get some essays done. And it made these things weigh so much more when they were later on in the chain of events. Thinking about the college life, if you're anything like me, playing catch up is kind of part of it, right? I'm the worst about that. I procrastinate so much. And once that first silly syllabus falls down, then it's downhill from there. You're catching up constantly. Of course, procrastination is so much fun. But if you're like me, this weight, it ramps up pretty quickly. Like, how can they expect me to write an essay and read from a book? It's just insane. It doesn't make any sense. I find it kind of absurd, though, that if we're realistic, if we actually look at life how it is, we give these trials so much more weight than they actually have, right? Think about a red light. We have all been stuck at a red light and seen somebody else have a full-blown rage because it takes one too many seconds, or the car in front of you doesn't go as soon as it turns green. Not us, not me or you, but somebody has definitely done this while you've been in the car. Seriously though, I want to spend some time thinking about why we make these things so big, right? We have these small things in life that ramp up so fast and become so heavy. It's so odd, but I want to take a glimpse of Job's life. I want to pick it apart a little bit and see his overwhelming feelings and why sometimes we feel that crashing weight when we go through some smaller things in life. So I want to start off in Job 1. You see this guy named Job. He's a man from a town called Uz. The Bible describes him as upright and blameless. He feared God and he turned from evil. He had a large family. He had tons of livestock. And on top of all of that, he lived super prosperously and he was all about God. He was super faith-driven. He regularly worshiped God. He gave offerings not only for him, but also for his kids that were grown. These kids, he didn't even know if they made a mistake, but just in case, Job wanted to cover them to make sure they were good in the eyes of God. He lived stable and secure. He lived a life full of blessings. But of course, we're talking about the domino effect, so he eventually had a crashing fall that turned for the worst. We go on to see what happens. Job 1:6, describes the opening verse about an enemy that Job had, one that you've definitely heard of. His name is Satan. He came to God and he challenged Job's faithfulness to God. He claimed that Job was only faithful to God because of the things that God gave him, the material things that he had, and that if he took all those things away from Job, Job would completely curse God and turn away from him. So God allowed Satan to test Job, but he set very particular boundaries. In this first trial, God told Satan he was not allowed to physically harm Job in any way. I know it might sound like God is allowing Job to suffer, but really God is demonstrating his sovereignty, his true sovereignty over everything in the midst of trials. Moving forward, we see what happens in Job, the domino effect that starts. After that interaction, we see Job and his family celebrating. All of his kids were having this massive feast at the oldest brother's house when a messenger came to Job. He said this, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing beside them, and the Sabine warriors swooped down and carried them all away. They killed all the servants with swords, and I am the only one that escaped." To tell you, it's a pretty heavy thing to just hear in the middle of a party, but it doesn't end there, because another messenger comes to Job while this first one was still speaking and says, "The fire of God came from heaven and burned up all your sheep, Job. You don't have any sheep left. And the servants that were watching the sheep, they're all gone too." While he was still speaking, another servant came and said, "The Chaldean raiders came and took all your camels." Job just lost all of his wealth in the matter of moments. But it doesn't end there. While he was still speaking, another messenger came to Job and said, "Your sons and your daughters were all eating and drinking at that party. A great wind struck the house and everybody died. Nobody made it out." In the matter of moments, Job lost everything. His world crumbled around him in one of maybe the fastest domino effects ever. It was gone. His entire life, everything that he had spent time building up was gone. All of his blessings. So I want to show you the first area that Job reacts to this. It's in Job 1, 20 through 22. Then Job got up, he tore his robe and he shaved his head. Then he threw himself down with his face on the ground and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return there. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. May the name of the Lord be blessed." In all this, Job did not sin, nor did he charge God with moral improprieties. To me, that sounds like a pretty broken man, right? That sounds like somebody who is just in the dumps. Worst of the worst. Maybe you're at home right now, and if you're honest, nobody's judging you, nobody's looking at you. Have you ever felt like this? Have you ever felt like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you just want to tear everything apart, shave your head, go bald, and just cry? Like there's no coming back. Might as well just get rid of the hair too. I won't lie, I found myself on my knees begging God a time or two to do what only he could do. But Job's faithfulness is different, right? He lost it all. I only lost a couple of things, and he kept praising God even then. Sometimes that can be difficult. But what goes on next is very interesting. We're going to jump down a little bit farther to chapter 3, Job 3:1. Job, he broke. The weight of the pain, the weight of what went on in the second verse broke him. I think it's pretty obvious that he kind of lost it all. This verse really carries a lot of weight, but the main sentence I want to focus on is this. The verse says, "After this, Job opened his mouth and he cursed the day he was born." That's a pretty big thing to do. That's a pretty big thing to curse the day you were born. That's insane. I think what's interesting though is Job didn't curse God. He didn't say, "Hey God, why did you do this to me?" And I urge you to go back and read the rest of Job to see what went down in that second verse. It was a lot of good stuff. It was a lot of stuff that was hard for him to deal with. But clearly, he was done. He was toast. He was like, might as well die. The suffering Job felt was so overwhelming that he wished that he hadn't even been born. He wished that nothing that had ever happened in his life had happened. That's a tough place to be. And it's a lot. Job had a really crazy story. Admittedly, I had a situation where I felt this weight. I didn't actually have this weight on me. But those middle couple verses where it's boom, 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 one after the next, the dominoes falling down, I felt that a little bit. It started sometime last October. I was chilling. I was actually here having a good time at a church event, and I went out to my car. It was probably 9 o'clock at night, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I turned on my car, and I realized I didn't have a headlight. It was completely out. It was gone. Couldn't see anything in front of my car, and I was like freaking out. I was like, what do I do? And the question I had just repeatedly, like, what happened? Like, everything was fixed, everything was good. I had just fixed my car. Why is it broken down now? And I still couldn't tell you why the headlight just randomly stopped working. But if you've ever experienced car trouble, like not at the house, it's scary, right? It's a little nerve-wracking, especially late at night, no headlight. It's freaky to drive through all of that town, back roads and all, in the dark, right? It's scary. Thankfully, I had one headlight that still kind of worked, so I just used the brights to get me all the way home. But still, it was an inconvenience that I didn't want to have to deal with. After this was like right before I started my semester of classes. I had new classes, I had new teachers, I had new syllabuses to read, the whole nine. And the first thing that they told me when I stepped foot in my first class was, this is going to be the hardest 7 weeks of your entire degree. That is not what you want to hear. That's not what anybody wants to hear when you walk into a room. Hey, by the way, this is going to be a tough 7 weeks. It's definitely not what I wanted to hear, but I quickly realized why that was, because I opened up our syllabus, because of course we have online syllabuses now, and I'm looking and I see essay, book report, and I'm like, what the heck, dude? Why are there so many? And then I get to my next class and I see all the free spots that I had for that previous class, got essays for that class. Just one after the next after the next. They're perfectly spaced to give me zero downtime. It was just one after the next after the next. And then one particularly cold winter day, right after Thanksgiving break, I was on my way to finish up one of my 8-page papers that I had to write early in the morning. Just driving down, cruising down the highway, and I hit black ice. And I wasn't in my car because I didn't have headlights, and I took my dad's truck straight into a ditch, head first. And the first thing that I thought to do was cry, of course. I mean, as anybody does in a ditch. It was terrifying. I thought I was gonna die. In fact, I thought I might have died because of how just shaking it was. I had never been in this situation, and I was just freaked out. Because of me being in a ditch, though, I thankfully was able to call some people. I called my dad, and he told me to call the insurance company, of course, and they helped me get through it. But it was like, are you serious? This was at the end of my dominoes. I didn't want to deal with this. I was in a ditch. It wasn't even my car, and I still had to write that paper. I did get it written, but it was frustrating. And I think when I look back on that moment, I realize that I got frustrated so fast. I think in all of our lives, frustration comes so fast because we live in a fast-paced culture, right? Our culture takes pride in speed. If you get a job done faster, you get a pat on the back. Our life is all about speed. So think back to that red light. That's why it's so frustrating. Why shouldn't everybody yield to me? I'm on my way to work. I'm on my way to school. They should just stop, right? Let my car go. I think that's so interesting that our life is such about speed. I want to move into our first takeaway, though. The first takeaway I have for you is that first domino falling always feels so big, right? It feels way bigger than it is. A headlight going out was rough, but it wasn't as bad as I felt like it was in the moment, right? The first domino for Job, it was heavy, but it wasn't life-ending. Job received the message that his donkeys and oxen had been taken away. That's like if you go into work on Monday and all of your stuff is packed up and you have a note on your desk that says, apologize for the sudden downshift, we're having a mass layoff, you don't have a job anymore. It's a rough domino, right? It's a kick in the teeth, it sucks, but your life isn't over, right? You can recover from it. And honestly, I feel like this is how a lot of first dominoes start. They start with a job going bad or a livelihood shift or a house shift or some sort of money effect or a savings account that you have to spend for some reason. For me, of course, it was my car, a necessary part of my daily life. Suddenly, I can't use it at night anymore. right? How am I supposed to go on a late night Taco Bell run? How am I supposed to go to the gym at night? I can't do any of these things. And of course, it's not life ending, but like it sucks. I don't want to have no headlight in my car. It's just frustrating. And that first domino feels so heavy. The second takeaway I want to go into is dominoes tend to fall faster when we try to catch them, right? When we try to control our lives the way that we have it instead of giving it to God, things fall fast. For Job, he tried to control it. He tried to have some sort of handle on it and keep those dominoes from falling, and they just picked up speed. Have you ever tried to catch a falling domino? Not like an actual domino, but like in your life. I did. It was the truck. I was trying to catch traction while my tires screeched into this ditch. I was stuck, leaned sideways, nowhere to go. And thankfully, I had made that call to my dad because that was really who walked me through it and helped calm me down in this moment of like, what do I even do? I remember sitting there, I didn't have any words to say. I just kept thinking, like, what am I gonna do? Like, what do I do here? What do I do now? What's the next step? And I think that's where a lot of us relate to Job. Not in the details, but in that moment of helplessness, when you realize that no matter what you do, you can't fix the situation on your own. I had to call somebody to tow me out, and I couldn't have done that on my own. I feel like in Job, he eventually reached this point where crying out in despair, and he wished he had never been born, but it wasn't because he stopped trusting God. It was because the weight was so heavy, and he was trying to carry it alone. He wasn't trying to carry it with God. I think a lot of times we do the same thing. We try catching the dominoes. Maybe it's your work where you try to sleep less. You try to cut an hour at the end of your day. You try to cut an hour at the beginning. You push a little extra hard. You think you're being more productive. But more often than not, that's what ends you up in a ditch, right? You try to do too much on your own. So I urge you to slow down when you can. Instead of speeding through life and forcing your way through the pressure, pause. Take a moment to ask for help, because it's okay to ask for help. Asking for help is necessary. Let God step in and let God do crazy things like he did in Job's life. The third takeaway I want to give you is that God isn't shocked with your mess. God didn't look at the bald and broken Job and ask him to calm down. He didn't say, Job, you're freaking out for no reason. God didn't tell Job he was overreacting. God didn't expect Job to be perfect in this time of pain. God doesn't expect us to be perfect. Honestly, more than once this semester of school, I've had the thought of quitting. I know a lot of college students say that, right? A lot of college students talk, I'm just gonna quit, it's too hard. I remember like as a kid playing sports, my parents constantly drilled into me, if you start something, you finish it. No matter what it is, if you start it, you finish it. For me, the thought of throwing in the towel was much heavier than the actual workload. It was never an option because what I'm going through is not for me, it's for God, it's for the kingdom. And I feel like as I was sitting there and contemplating quitting, I felt like I was at like the weakest point of my entire life, because quitting was never something I ever imagined for college. And the fact that God gave me the opportunity to go to college was so worth it. It was hard, right? It's hard going through difficult situations. It's hard going through things that are stressful and anxious. And the small dominoes do feel so heavy, especially after the third or fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh one. The most interesting part of that all, though, is not once did God ever leave. Not once did he take the ministry that I was working in away from me. Not once did he take the school away from me. He didn't look at the mess that I was in, that honestly I had created because of my procrastination. It was over some light assignments, right? It wasn't even that heavy, but it was so weighty to me, right? I gave it so much weight. And I think a lot of times in our lives, we give things weight that shouldn't have the weight. I think it's so interesting because God, he never left while I was going through that. In fact, he gave me the strength to keep going when it was hard. He gave me the strength to keep going on the days that I really just didn't want to. On the days that I had 3 or 4 essays to write in a few hours, God gave me the strength to just keep going. Because it's hard, right? Sometimes trials will come that are difficult, that don't make sense why they're as heavy as they are, but they're heavy. Maybe the dominoes in your life feel like they're coming to a close, and it's so heavy. Each one feels like it rumbles the ground. And it's hard to watch them fall down. It's difficult. I think what stands out to me about Job and how his story ended was Job ended with surrender. Not because things started to make sense, but because he opened his eyes and he realized that God is God. God loved him and cared about him so much, even though he went through these trials. Only after he surrendered everything to God did he become restored. He was given new life. He was given renewed purpose and the joy of watching his family grow up again. That doesn't mean that every story ends the same way, but it does mean that God wants a relationship with you, no matter where you are. No matter if you feel like the first domino is just starting to fall, or if you feel like the last one has just fallen, or if you feel like you're right in the middle, God wants to have a relationship with you, no matter where you are. He wants to hear you cry out from the ditch, or from the classroom, or maybe it's from the couch that you've been sitting on. He wants to hear you from the place that you're at, no matter where it is. Maybe you have a little bit of strength, maybe you have a lot. God wants to hear you cry out to him. So as we step into this new year's, I urge you not to settle for empty resolutions as we often do, right? We all make these resolutions that end up being empty. Instead, I want you to start with something better, a renewed hope and trust in the Lord, a renewed hope and trust in God. Please join me in prayer as we close up here. Lord, thank you for Job. Lord, thank you for letting us dissect this a little bit and look into Job's life and pull the restoration and mercy that you gave him out of it. I pray that as we move into this new year, that we will be drawn to you in every way, Lord. Thank you for holding us when the dominoes get too heavy. Thank you for holding us when we feel like we can't do it anymore, Lord, and keeping us sane and safe. Lord, in your mighty, holy name, amen.